The floor shook under Amanda's desk, not from an earthquake, but from Kyle slamming his visionary loafers onto the table in the dev bullpen like he was christening the goddamn Mayflower. He was laughing at something on Slack, probably one of his own jokes. Amanda, tell me you didn't write this, he said, holding up a printed sheet of her code like it was evidence from a crime scene. Looks like someone copy-pasted a Bible into the comments. She didn't flinch, just blinked behind her glasses and clicked her mouse. It's audit trail documentation, legally required. Kyle grinned like a man who'd never been audited in his life. Yeah, but do they read it? She wanted to say yes. She wanted to say, actually, Kyle, when the SEC comes knocking and a $2.7 million discrepancy shows up, they don't want vibes, they want footprints. But instead, Amanda said nothing, because she'd learned something in 15 years of writing back-end systems that held the whole damn company together. No one listens when you yell, but they sure as hell pay attention when the system stops working. Now, before I go any further, I gotta say this. 97% of you listening right now aren't subscribed. Which, I mean, fair. Maybe you just stumbled in here while rage Googling how to handle tech bros with fragile egos. But if you're still with me, maybe hit that subscribe button. It costs you nothing and it motivates our little team like caffeine with a vengeance. Back to the story, Amanda had built the financial processing system from the inside out, back when the company was 3 people in a strip mall next to a vape shop and a dentist that only opened on Tuesdays. It wasn't sexy code. There were no animations, no bells, no whistles, but it was clean, legible, Loctite. Every variable had a purpose, every log a breadcrumb trail back to sanity. Legal loved her. Product barely knew she existed unless something broke. And engineering had evolved. The old guard, quiet, principled folks like Amanda were getting replaced by fast-talking 30 under 30 imports with disruption on the brain and 6-month exit strategies. Kyle was just the loudest of them. Amanda's desk was a little shrine of quiet efficiency. A monitor with sticky notes in her own shorthand, coffee mug with I void warranties written on it, and a mechanical keyboard that clicked like a Geiger counter in Chernobyl every time she got pissed. Kyle showed up 3 months ago. Former startup CTO, which meant he once built an app that got acquired by a company that eventually got acquired by a company that now sells toothpaste subscription boxes. He talked like every sentence came with a stock option. And from the moment he walked in, Manda could smell the arrogance, smelled like Axe body spray and unpaid invoices. He didn't ask how the system worked, he assumed. And when he found Amanda's module, the one that reconciled incoming payments with internal transaction logs and cross-checked them against federal compliance standards, he didn't ask why it was written the way it was. He just said, this looks slow. It's not, Amanda said, it's thorough. Same thing, Kyle said, chuckling. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. The documentation is part of the system. It's not just for humans. The sec Kyle was already opening his laptop. Don't worry, I'll clean it up. Amanda could feel something under her ribs tighten like a wrench. Clean up what? The training wheels. You've got like 3 paragraphs describing a loop that runs 5 times, because if someone alters that loop and doesn't realize it affects the escrow release, then we need better coders. There it was, that phrase. That stupid, silicon smug phrase. Better coders. As if this was a video game and she hadn't spent years coding for real people with real money and real jail time attached to their signatures. Kyle went to the CTO, pitched a rewrite, said he could optimize the processing module and cut runtime by 38%. Never mind that Amanda's system had less than 0.01% error rate over 5 years. Never mind that no client account had ever been frozen inappropriately. The CTO, who wore thin-rimmed glasses and once said the word synergy 5 times in a single sentence, nodded along like Kyle was offering him a map to El Dorado. If we can shave time off reconciliation, it'll look great for the investor deck, he said. Amanda, still polite, still composed, asked, have you checked with legal? They'll adapt, Kyle said. She didn't scream. She didn't quit. She went back to her desk, opened her files, and started making copies. Quietly, thoroughly, just like everything else she did. Amanda didn't know when exactly the system would snap, but she knew why it would. Because the one thing Kyle hadn't understood, refused to understand, was that her comments weren't fluff. They were a lifeline, a roadmap, a confession written in plain text to keep regulators happy and clients untouched. She wasn't documenting for herself. She was documenting for the day everything collapsed. Amanda knew exactly how this kind of guy moved through a company, like bleach through a bloodstain. Loud, overconfident, and always too busy being a thought leader to understand what the hell he was actually doing. Kyle strutted into the Monday code review like he owned the oxygen, leaned back in his chair like it was a throne, and opened with, okay, so who wrote the bedtime story? There it was again. That slick smirk, that lopsided sense of humor that made interns laugh and veterans check Glassdoor listings. Amanda didn't even blink. She clicked her pen and said that bedtime story has been running flawlessly for 5 years, passed every audit, never froze a single account. Kyle grinned, exactly. It's due for an upgrade. He was allergic to comments in code, said it cluttered the signal. Said if a developer needed instructions, they weren't cut out for the job. Amanda had worked with people like that before, the ones who treated clarity like a weakness and documentation like graffiti. She'd seen what happened when they rewrote systems without understanding what held them together. Now Kyle was pitching a full refactor of the reconciliation engine, the module that matched up client transactions with internal account balances and generated the audit trails needed for federal compliance. The code Amanda had built herself, tested by fire, patched after 3 major regulation changes, and trusted by every branch of legal. But Kyle didn't care about that. He cared about shaving milliseconds. We're gonna cut processing time in half, he declared to the room, arms out like Moses parting the Red Sea. Right now it's bloated. I mean, he pointed at a line of Amanda's code on the projector. Look at this. You've got 4 lines explaining a fallback routine. 4 lines. Anyone with a brain can figure out what it does. Amanda's voice was flat. You'd be surprised what people with a brain forget when they're subpoenaed. A few chuckles, mostly nervous. The junior devs glanced at each other. One of them mouthed yo and leaned back slowly in his chair. Kyle just smiled like she'd handed him a compliment. Relax, he said. We're not building nukes. It's just a reconciliation engine. Amanda leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. Just one that handles $840 million in annual transactions. But sure, not nukes. The CTO, sipping some overpriced green sludge from his reusable cup, chimed in. I like the initiative, Kyle. Maybe we give this a shot, just sandbox it for now. Amanda, help him with the legacy notes, but don't block the rewrite. It's a good exercise in modernization. Amanda nodded slowly. Of course. Because that's what she did, she nodded, she saved. She archived, she went back to her desk and quietly copied every version of the code base to an external encrypted drive. She pulled up her compliance checklist, the one she wrote after the 2019 audit scare, and double-checked the requirements tied to the module. Every line item, every signature. Then she drafted a memo to legal and saved it as a draft subject line, potential risk, reconciliation engine documentation removal. She didn't send it. Not yet. She watched Kyle take a junior dev into a side room, bragging about the new logic tree he was building from scratch. We'll just process everything in chunks, no need to validate every pass, she overheard. Amanda closed her eyes for a second and saw it, the cracks forming. Slowly, quietly. Until one day a transaction would slip through with no record. Then 2, then 40. Until the auto flag system she built with legal's blessing had no breadcrumb trail to follow. The irony? Her system had never needed to be fast. It needed to be precise. Traceable, bulletproof, but no one sold that in a pitch deck. Precision didn't trend on LinkedIn. Kyle was chasing metrics that looked good in graphs but fell apart under subpoenas. She sent herself a backup of her own code, downloaded every version she'd touched over the last 6 months, filed the compliance memo locally, timestamped and signed. And then she waited. She wasn't scared. She was just irritated, the kind of irritation that calcifies into steel. Amanda didn't need Kyle to crash the system. He was going to do it all by himself. All she had to do was stay quiet and let the landmines do what they were built to do. Amanda cornered Kyle by the espresso machine. Not because she drank espresso, it tasted like scorched metal. Because it was the only place he slowed down long enough to hear a full sentence. He was poking at the touchscreen like he was disarming a bomb, hoodie sleeves pushed to his elbows like some tech messiah, when she said calmly, removing the audit comments violates internal policy and federal guidelines. It's not a preference thing. It's law. Kyle didn't even turn. Audit trails still in the logs. The logs don't explain why a loop was skipped or a fallback was triggered. Logs capture what? Comments explain why. Now he turned. One eyebrow raised, the other smugly relaxed. If the code's good, it shouldn't need an essay. Amanda stared at him. This man had the confidence of someone who thought Sarbanes-Oxley was a Marvel villain. She spoke slower this time, like explaining to a child why the stove was hot. This isn't a blog post, Kyle. If a financial discrepancy is flagged by a regulator and there's no visible rationale in the processing logic, get investigated, you get investigated. He sipped the espresso, winced, will be fine, that phrase again, will be fine. Amanda had heard that right before the 2017 audit storm when half their accounting stack had to be rebuilt in 2 weeks because some genius optimized away the validation layer. Back then, legal had nearly sent out carrier pigeons looking for a scapegoat. Amanda fixed it in 11 days, slept under her desk. No one remembered, except her. Kyle walked off with his coffee, earbuds in, already on a Slack call. Amanda watched him disappear down the hall, talking about streamlining processes to someone who probably hadn't written a line of production code since Obama was in office. She went back to her desk and stared at her terminal for a solid minute. Then she did the thing she'd been holding off on. She pulled up the company's internal compliance portal, searched reconciliation logic, and found her own policy memo from 2 years ago. Still active, still valid. She opened it, attached her signature again, and downloaded a copy to her encrypted drive. She printed one for good measure. No one ever sees hard copies coming. Later that day, the CTO summoned them both to the glass box conference room, affectionately called the fish tank by the engineering team because it made you feel watched and stupid. Kyle led the conversation, waving his hands like he was casting a spell. We're shaving off about 42% of the processing delay by batch aggregating transaction IDs before validation. The whole flow's gonna feel lighter. Cleaner. The CTO nodded along, half listening and half scrolling on his phone. Amanda cleared her throat. Have you reviewed the compliance trail implications? Kyle didn't miss a beat. Amanda's concerned about comments. That slimy redirect. She didn't take the bait. It's not comments. It's verifiable human-readable logic that satisfies audit traceability. If someone changes the fallback logic and we lose the justification, we can't defend the code to regulators. It won't hold up. The CTO looked up now. We still have Git history, right? Amanda exhaled, sharp and through her nose. Yes, and regulators love waiting through 27 commits to find a deleted rationale for a float-twint conversion. CTO smiled like a man who didn't want problems, just faster demos. Let's give Kyle's version a shot. We can always roll back if there's an issue. Amanda looked down at her notes, then folded them. Of course, she said softly. And just like that, the floor disappeared beneath her. She walked out of the fish tank, past a junior dev nervously cradling a red bull like a baby bird, and back to her desk. She didn't rage, didn't argue. She plugged in her encrypted drive and ran one more backup. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before she typed. Hash backup 04 Amanda pre-Kyle, rewrite annotated full. She hit enter. Then she opened a blank file. No code, no comments, just a single sentence typed at the top. They will remember this moment. She saved that too. The new version of the code went live on a Wednesday afternoon, slid into production like a knife under the ribs. No fanfare, no postmortem. Just a cheerful Slack from Kyle, Rocket Live. Reconciliator 2.0, now 42% faster. Amanda didn't respond. She just stared at the message. Then closed her laptop for exactly 7 seconds and reopened it like a blink, but for machines. She'd been expecting this moment, had prepped for it like a soldier prepping a bunker that everyone else insisted would never be needed. First step, she archived her full original module, comments, logic, rationale, Git diffs, every single trailing comma, and zipped it into a file labeled Golden Record Amanda V1 Final, because if it ever came down to legal war, this would be her black box. Second step, she reopened the draft compliance memo she'd written 3 weeks prior, added a short update noting that the new version had removed critical documentation tied to Regulation 404(b), and sent it, CCing herself, legal and legal's favorite compliance consultant, Roy, who Amanda had once saved from a catastrophic rejects incident. Third step, she pulled out the manila folder in her bottom drawer, the real-world one with red tab dividers and actual ink signatures. She printed the memo. She initialed it, dated it, and slid it between potential risk reconciliator edits and 2023 emergency recovery plans. Then she turned to the crown jewel, the auto-flagging system. She had written it 2 years ago after a nightmare week where a junior engineer accidentally deleted 32,000 lines of transaction logs during an unscheduled performance fix. The system had no external name, no Slack channel, no documentation that anyone else could follow, but it lived quietly, deep in the stack. Its job was simple. If a transaction passed through the processing module without traceable logic, a breadcrumb comment, a justification note, even a simple // fallback triggered due to insufficient funds, the system would trigger an internal flag. If 10 flags appeared in a 24-hour window, it would notify a monitoring service. If 50 appeared in a week, it would automatically freeze any account that lacked verification metadata. Amanda checked the logs. Autoflagger V1.3 status, active, last triggered 214 days ago. She sat back in her chair and exhaled slowly. The system wasn't malicious. It wasn't even revenge. It was safety, a tripwire for stupidity. She hadn't told anyone about it, and no one had ever asked. That's the thing about invisible safeguards. They don't matter until they matter. In the following days, the platform was quiet. A few minor bugs trickled in. A failed transaction in Chile. An extra-long processing delay in a mid-tier West Coast client. Kyle waved them off in the team channel with a little shrug emoji. Teething issues. Nothing the next patch can't fix. Amanda responded to ticket escalations like normal, fixed unrelated bugs, smiled during stand-ups. But beneath the surface, her posture changed. She wasn't guarding the code anymore. She was observing the wreckage as it assembled itself. She stopped arguing with Kyle, stopped correcting him. Let him say things like, the system feels snappier now, and clients feel like they're getting results faster. He was measuring user vibes, while Amanda was watching forensic flags light up like a string of cursed Christmas lights. By Friday evening, the system had logged 7 flagged transactions, unjustified, undocumented, and pushed through without audit breadcrumbs. The auto-flagger didn't care that Kyle's code was faster. It only cared about traceability. Amanda opened her terminal and typed, list auto-flagger logs and find unverified. 7 lines, 7 missing explanations, 7 future headaches. She leaned back and watched the blinking cursor, that quiet metronome of truth, and whispered to no one, "See you soon." It started small, like hairline cracks in drywall after a thunderstorm. Few glitches reported by client support, lag on a batch transaction here, an account showing as pending 2 days longer than usual there. Low-level stuff. The kind of weirdness that could be blamed on caching, or third-party latency, or Mercury retrograde. Kyle, of course, had an answer for everything. Growing pains, he said during the Monday stand-up, arms folded like a proud dad watching his toddler punch holes in drywall. We'll squash those in the next sprint. Ken's running leaner than ever. The CTO nodded. Just make sure performance stays ahead of the investor preview. We want those numbers crisp. Amanda kept her camera off. She said nothing, took notes, filed tickets, assigned herself to a minor visual bug in the admin portal and fixed it in 4 minutes flat. No one noticed. What they also didn't notice yet was the way the flags were stacking. She checked the auto flagger twice a day now, like a farmer watching river levels rise after days of rain. 10 flags in total, then 14. Then 19. Each flag represented a transaction that had passed through the reconciliation module with no explanation, no comment, no logic tag, no traceable rationale for a fallback being triggered. Just clean, fast, undocumented code slithering its way past safeguards that used to hold up in audits like steel walls. Now they were paper windows. Legal hadn't reached out directly, but Amanda saw the smoke. One of the corporate lawyers, Jean, the one who used to loop Amanda into calls every time something smelled like regulatory compliance, posted a message in the general legal channel. "Hey team, anyone know why 12 accounts triggered a suspicious activity freeze last week? Just trying to reconcile with the dev team logs. No breadcrumbs on a few cases. Ping me if you've got insight." Amanda watched the message go unanswered. Another quiet ping, this time in the #audit prep channel, just flagging this for awareness, seeing a few gaps in fallback rationale on the back end. Might be nothing, might be something. Person shrugging. Kyle didn't react, probably didn't even see it. He'd muted that channel after his second week, said it was clutter. The same way he'd called Amanda's comments noise. She imagined him now, eating overpriced poke out of a paper bowl in a meeting room named after a Harry Potter house, too busy sketching new flowcharts to see the iceberg scraping the hull. Amanda didn't reply in Slack. She didn't slide into DMs, she just took screenshots, quietly. Each one timestamped and zipped into a folder called Audit Threads Archive. The junior devs started noticing too, but they didn't say anything outright. They were smart. Cowed. One of them forwarded her a ticket privately with a subject line that just said, "This feels weird." The ticket showed a transaction rerouted twice by a fallback path that should have been retired 6 months ago. Amanda traced the request manually. No reason for it to be rerouted. No note, no justification. But the system let it pass just barely. 23 flags. She fixed another visual bug. Rewrote a line of CSS that no one asked for but was broken since last quarter. Pushed a silent commit. Drank her coffee. Black, room temp, same mug every day. At the next stand-up, Kyle opened with, "Performance is stable. Clients are happy. We'll do a cleanup pass on legacy stuff next week." Amanda nodded, muted. The CTO turned to her once, just once, and said, "All good on your end?" "Crystal," she replied, and it was. Because from where she sat, buried beneath 3 layers of bureaucracy and a mountain of discarded wisdom, everything was unfolding exactly as she'd written it. The system wasn't angry. It wasn't rebellious. It was obedient. It had one job: trigger when the traceability vanished. Amanda didn't need to raise a hand, didn't need to shout. She just needed to wait. It hit at 9:43 a.m. on a Tuesday. The kind of Tuesday that starts out calm, overcast skies, someone microwaving soup at 9 o'clock a.m. for reasons that should require an exorcism, Slack mostly quiet except for the usual corporate dopamine drips. New client signed. And who stole my charger? Amanda was writing a test case for a totally unrelated front-end fix when her monitor pinged with a forwarded email chain marked urgent. Subject line: Client Rydell Capital missing transaction records. The body was from their CFO. Tight. Panicked. Our ledger is missing 7 entries. Dashboard shows negative balance. We need clarity before our 11 o'clock quarterly briefing. She marked it unread, sipped her coffee. The world was starting to tilt. 10 minutes later, another flag in the auto flagger, then 3 more, then 7. By 10:05, the internal monitoring dashboard looked like a Christmas tree hooked up to a car battery. Frozen accounts. Transaction IDs with blank justifications. Fallback triggers with no breadcrumbs. The security protocol Amanda had designed, quiet, patient, merciless, was no longer issuing warnings. It was executing lockdowns, and it was doing it fast. 1 minute, things were lagging. The next, the system froze 22,000 accounts. Any account flagged by the autoflagger with 3 or more untraceable fallback events entered a hard lockdown. Manual override required. Verification by legal. Transaction history scrubbed line by line. It was designed to stop fraud. Now, it was stopping everything. Amanda's inbox began detonating like popcorn in a pressure cooker. Security flag summary report 238, New flags urgent support call escalation, 17 clients down priority 1 escalation. All accounts frozen on platform east. She didn't reply. Didn't blink. She opened the logs and watched the flags roll in like waves during a storm surge. Then came the cherry on the apocalypse Sunday. A mass alert popped into Slack. Double system lockdown active. Investigation underway. All hands on deck double. Someone tried to ping Amanda directly, probably a junior support engineer who'd seen her name on the module history. She let it sit. Down the hall, chaos swelled. She could hear Kyle's voice through the wall, climbing pitch like a tea kettle, trying to explain things he didn't understand to people who'd stopped caring about his tone and started caring about risk exposure. He said the words you never want to hear in a crisis. I don't know. I thought the fallback handling would catch that. Amanda's lips curled just slightly. That's the thing about fallback handling. It only works if someone documents what it's supposed to fall back to. The CTO's door slammed shut. Meeting had started. Kyle was in it. Amanda was not. At 11:04, the CEO sent a company-wide email titled, "Critical System Incident Immediate Action Required by Noon." 3 compliance officers were in the office physically. Not on Zoom, not on Slack. In the building. Suits, badges, the whole walking audit circus. Amanda watched them march down the hallway from behind her monitor like ghosts passing through drywall. Still no one called her name. Still no one asked the one question that mattered. Who built the freeze logic? Because if they had, they'd know this wasn't a bug, it wasn't even a failure. It was the system finally working exactly as it was meant to. Amanda opened her terminal again and typed, "List last 50 lines of auto-flagger logs." The list scrolled by like a war memorial. No audit trail. No fallback reason. No explanatory comment. And now, no access. She checked the compliance memo she'd sent last week. Opened the email. Confirmed the timestamp. Her name, her signature, her warning, all preserved in legal's inbox like a fire alarm someone had cheerfully ignored. Someone dropped something out in the hallway, a mug or a phone. Maybe a job title. Amanda turned her monitor brightness down to 70%, leaned back in her chair, and whispered the line she always saved for moments like this. It wasn't revenge. It was prevention, and prevention had teeth. The emergency all-hands was called for 2:00 p.m., but Amanda got the knock on her door at 1:46. It wasn't a Slack ping. It wasn't an email. It was a knock. That ancient analog signal that meant someone finally figured out where the grown-ups were hiding. A junior HR rep stood there, eyes wide, voice rehearsed. "Legal needs you. Conference room 4. Amanda closed her laptop, unplugged the encrypted drive, slid it into her canvas tote like she was packing a lunch. She didn't ask what it was about. She didn't have to. The silence had cracked. Now came the harvest. Conference room 4 was already full, legal, 2 guys from InfoSec who looked like they hadn't blinked in hours, the CTO with his hands buried in his hair, and Kyle pacing near the whiteboard like a man trying to outrun a plane crash. "Amanda," said Jean from legal, voice tight but respectful, "we need clarity on the reconciliation module. The system's flagging every fallback as undocumented." Amanda nodded once, calm as snowfall. She opened her tote, pulled out a manila folder, and set it on the table with the kind of deliberate grace usually reserved for evidence in murder trials. Inside, her original compliance memo. Dated, signed, time-stamped. The policy reference. The exact line item tied to mandatory audit traceability and fallback logic. She slid another paper across the table, a printed diff between her last approved version and Kyle's live deployment. Pages and pages of red, comments stripped, logic altered, justifications gone. One bold line of text stood out like a gunshot. "Hash rationale removed, cleaner output here," she said, tapping the corner of the page. And then she handed over the final nail. Her original pull request review request, forwarded via email and printed with metadata. Highlighted in yellow was Kyle's response to the compliance section, "Not necessary." Jean read it twice, set it down like it had burned her fingers. Kyle tried to speak. It wasn't like. Jean raised her hand. "One finger. Quiet. We've already looped in the SEC," she said flatly. "Their preliminary response is that this constitutes a failure of due diligence under 802C. The CTO looked like he might throw up into his reusable water bottle. Amanda said nothing. She didn't need to. Her work had spoken in its native language. Timestamps, signatures, triggered logic, accountability. Kyle flailed. "No one told me this stuff was legally required. There should have been a warning system." Amanda finally spoke. Not loud, just cold. "There was me." The room inhaled as one organism. The InfoSec guy looked up from his laptop. "So just to confirm, this system didn't crash, it didn't fail. It's behaving as intended." "Yes," Amanda said, "that's the part no one understood. You can't rip out the brakes and call it faster. Eventually it just hits a wall." The CTO looked over with dead eyes. "Why didn't you stop it?" "I did," she said, lifting the memo again. "You all just didn't listen." Jean sat back, expression unreadable, but her knuckles were white. "We'll need to do a full rollback. And a joint response team for the SEC. Kyle's voice dropped to a pathetic whimper. "This isn't my fault." Amanda gathered her folder, stood slowly, and adjusted the strap on her bag. "Actually," she said, eyes locked on his, "it's only your fault. And then she turned, heels silent on the carpet, and walked out of the room like the courtroom was adjourned. She didn't slam the door. She didn't need to. The system already had. By Thursday morning, the building felt like a crime scene. No one made eye contact. Even the espresso machine was quieter, like it too knew a public execution had taken place. Amanda arrived at 8:13 sharp, same as always. Same parking spot, same travel mug, same cardigan that still smelled faintly of printer toner and peppermint gum. But now, when she walked through the lobby, the receptionist actually stood up. The sex auditing consultant had flown in that morning, an older man named Carlton, in a dark navy suit and orthopedic shoes that squeaked when he walked, but somehow still terrified everyone. He spent exactly 3 hours inside the glass-walled fishbowl conference room with legal, infosec, and a forensic copy of the transaction logs. Amanda was not invited to that meeting either, but she didn't need to be. At 11:02 a.m., an email hit the company-wide mailing list from legal with the subject line: Preliminary Compliance Review Summary Findings. Confidential. Amanda opened it, eyes scanning down the bullet points until she hit the one that mattered. Legacy Reconciliation Module, authored by A. Trent, identified as precise, transparent, and fully compliant with federal audit standards under SOX 404B. 2 lines down, rewritten module deployed by K. Avery, flagged as non-auditable code with critical regulatory violations, including absence of fallback rationale and undocumented decision trees. Amanda leaned back in her chair, hands folded in her lap, and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for 4 days. Kyle was nowhere to be seen. Rumor had it he'd been pulled from his desk mid-sprint planning and escorted gently, but firmly, into a small meeting room with an HR liaison and a red folder. His Slack went silent at 10:26 a.m. No status bubble, no last message, just vanished like a vapor trail in cold air. The CTO made a brief appearance at the all-hands Zoom that afternoon, mumbling something about process misalignment and regrettable oversights before retreating back into the abyss. When asked about oversight, he reportedly told legal, "I trusted my team." Which, translated, meant, if someone's going to get fired, I'd prefer it not be me. Amanda received a calendar invite that evening, private, from the CEO. His office was a sterile box lined with framed motivational quotes that now felt hilariously ironic. He offered her a seat, then launched into a soft-spoken monologue full of words like integrity, maturity, and deep institutional knowledge. Then he slid the offer across the table. Lead Dev, Kyle's role. Title bump, full authority over code-based practices and deployment policy. Open headcount for rebuilding the team. A signing bonus in recognition of her quiet vigilance. Amanda looked at the envelope, then looked up at him. "You don't need a lead dev," she said. "You need ears." He blinked. "Sorry, people knew this was coming. They said it. I said it. No one heard it." The CEO opened his mouth, closed it, cleared his throat. "Still," he said, "you've earned this." She gave him a small, tired smile. "No, I preserved this. That's not the same thing." Then she stood up, extended her hand, shook his, and said, "I'll train whoever you hire, but I won't sit in that seat." Outside, she paused near the elevators and pulled out her phone. Updated her LinkedIn headline with 6 quiet words: built compliant systems. Trusted the silence. No exclamation marks, no corporate jargon, no hunger for revenge. Just the calm certainty of someone who'd built the walls while everyone else partied, and knew one day they'd be grateful the roof hadn't caved in. Amanda's resignation letter was exactly 4 lines long. No sentiment, no nostalgia, just facts, dates, signatures. Her tone was so neutral, so coldly precise that HR called her twice to ask if she meant to include a farewell message for the team. She didn't. The farewell had already happened. It was in every log line, every ignored memo, every flagged transaction that screamed from the back end when no one else would. Her exit interview was scheduled for 10:30 a.m. in meeting room 3C, with a junior HR associate who looked like she was still getting used to adult shoes. She asked Amanda all the standard questions, voice tight with the awkward tension of someone who knew this was not a normal offboarding. "How would you describe your time here?" "Necessary," Amanda replied. "What would you have changed?" "The listening. Any parting advice for leadership?" Amanda paused, considered, then answered by fewer whiteboards. "Read more comments." The interview ended 10 minutes early. Down the hall, Kyle sat slouched inside a glass-walled office that had already been gutted of its power. No badge access, no Slack, no repo permissions. He looked like a man who'd fallen through his own reflection, staring out with the hollow detachment of someone who just now realized none of the buzzwords he built his castle on had actually been made of brick. Amanda passed his office without hesitation. He looked up, locked eyes with her, and for a brief second she thought he might say something. Apologize, deflect, plead, but no. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. Good. At the legal department's front desk, she pulled a sealed envelope from her bag and set it down gently. Label: Amanda Trent Risk Memo Addendum inside. A full postmortem she'd written in the wake of the incident. A clean, point-by-point breakdown of the systemic failures that had led to the lockdowns, not just the code, but the culture. The dismissal of warnings. The celebration of speed over sense. the erosion of quiet competence under the weight of louder egos. It wasn't written in anger. It was written in clarity, the kind that only comes after being right for too long in rooms full of wrong. She turned, walked out through the sliding doors, and didn't look back. That afternoon, while the company scrambled to reassign her tasks and legal sent out their sanitized talking points, Amanda sat on her back porch with a cup of black tea and her cat, Delphi, asleep across her feet. She opened her laptop, logged into LinkedIn, and removed every bullet point beneath her job title. In its place, she typed a single line: built resilient systems. Let them speak. Then she closed the laptop. No press release. No leaving the dream team post. No slideshow of hallway selfies with synthetic smiles. Just silence. The same silence that once held 22,000 accounts in place without fail. The kind of silence that says, you don't have to yell when the code already told the story. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.